What is up, and welcome to the Bet Chicago Sports Podcast. I'm Shane Jackson. Joined with me today is Spencer Urquhart from BetNola.com. He was just here last week to preview Week 3, and he did so well previewing Week 3. I thought it was great to have him on and kind of recap all his winners. Remember, you can follow him at BetWithSpence. Spencer, how's it going? How much did you win over the weekend?
Going well, Shane. Should have won more because I nailed a lot of my big picks. The Bengals are covered, Jags are covered, Colts money line. I nailed all those, but I always chicken out as far as putting a lot of money up because I've lost them. You can't win them all, but sometimes I just gotta, when I feel strongly, just go with it. But I probably won around at least $50 from all those.
Yeah, you never complain about a day that ends with a profit. Always recommended to the listeners and viewers of the show. Bet what you're okay with losing, right? Because you will have days where it just doesn't work, and then obviously you have days like Spencer just had, and you see the board clearly. But as
Yeah.
long as you stay within your means and keep the bankroll management the same, 1 to 2% of your unit size of your bankroll, you should be fine. So this is supposed to be fun for a lot of people. So losing is not a lot of fun. So try to minimize that as much as possible. But really, this is about like what we learned from a betting perspective and how we can use that moving forward. So, we won't dive into every single game, but I think it's always nice to maybe look back at the slate overall and maybe a few games that stood out and just see what kind of stood out to us. And maybe that could be helpful for week 4 and down the road. Remember that Bet Chicago Sports is provided by Caesar Sportsbook, the official odds partner. If you do not have an account with them, you can sign up with them today by scanning the QR code in the lower right corner of the video version of this show. If you're watching or if you listen to the audio podcast later on, just go to any article at shawlocal.com/bet and click on the link in the article to get that sign-up code as well. Spencer, looking back at the week 3 that was, what was your biggest thing that you learned from Sunday's action?
Yeah, it's tough to say, because they had a lot of interesting stuff go down. I would say though that, I thought the Jags would cover, but when Justin Herbert played, I was surprised that they're able to win straight up. I wasn't surprised about Trevor Lawrence because, like I said on the last show, I feel like he could potentially jump into the MVP race. And after last week, I think he's in there because he showed that and the defense too. The Jags showed. I mean, that's the biggest thing I learned, that the Jags, they're no longer just the Jags, the joke Jags. They're a legit division contender and potential AFC contender if they continue playing like they have.
Yeah, it just kind of shows the disaster that they had to deal with last year, that it was so bad under Urban Meyer that we never saw any glimpses really of this. But you had to think that with the coach who had a clue what was going on, maybe they'd have better results. And maybe it's leading to much better results than some people expected as well. Because they're an exciting team, and I think they are for real. The numbers speak for themselves. They're an EPA offense, high efficient offense, and they're clicking right now. And Trevor Lawrence looks like he's already the real deal. So yeah, very exciting team. They will run into what is the freight train of the Eagles in week 4. So that'll be a very exciting matchup. Right now they're getting 6.5 points at Caesar Sportsbook. So that would be an interesting matchup to see how real maybe the Jaguars are early on. That may end up being a tough test for them. I think
Jalen Hurts, another early MVP candidate.
Absolutely. I think my big takeaway, and honestly, it might be a little bit cheating because I thought this last year, right? Last year it felt like there was no elite teams, right? And I don't think there's no elite teams this year. I just think due to maybe some injuries, it's definitely like tighter within the entire league. So the Bills are really banged up right now, obviously, and they're the clear elite team when fully healthy. I think they're a point and a half better than the next best team. But they're not completely healthy right now. Chargers, there's nobody dealing with as many injuries right now as them. I thought they belonged in that kind of top 3-4 discussion, and now they could be trending way down with all the injuries they're experiencing. And you look across the league for the rest of the league. I mean, it's just the bad teams are a little bit better than we expected, and the good teams maybe a little bit worse than we expected. And all of a sudden, it's the margin of error is super thin. Yeah. I think all the spreads were within double-digit games were within 2.5 to 3 points on the spread. It just feels like it's really tough to win on a week-to-week basis in this league, especially now with everybody so closely together. It makes, obviously handicapping this league very difficult, but I think that'll be something really interesting to monitor because, at some point, I think some teams are going to emerge. Right now, it's not looking pretty from that standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I still think you can, from these early weeks, you can still kind of pinpoint the haves and the have-nots. Like, for example, tonight, like I still don't buy the Giants, even though they're 2-0. I think they're gonna get exposed tonight. Just like different ones from like the Commanders. Like I feel, they could do pretty well against the Eagles. Carson Wentz, that got exposed, and different. Just trying to go down the list here of ones that got exposed. I mean, that was probably the main. And then the Chiefs, the Chiefs against the Colts, the Chiefs, the almighty Chiefs got exposed. They could easily be 1-2 on the season because in week 2 they barely squeaked it out against the Chargers. So yeah, there's even more parity than usual this year. But the haves and the have-nots will come to fruition. That's how it always ends up.
And it doesn't help that I think quarterback play, especially from the league standpoint, is down from where it's been, right? Mahomes, you just talked about the Chiefs, right? It used to be bread and butter, right? Bet over 2.5 touchdown passes for Mahomes in September. Like, you were used to like explosive Mahomes Chiefs offense, and obviously they did not look the part on Sunday. And even, they left a lot of plays out there in that Thursday night football game against the Chargers as well. There's just reliable elite quarterbacks that we always count on. And maybe they're not completely delivering on a week-to-week basis. And just it's making, I feel like the team's a little bit closer together.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I didn't really think about that, but yeah, with the quarterback play, I mean, because you got Jalen Hurts performing really well, Trevor Lawrence, but there's a lot that haven't. I mean, Burrow, he did pretty good this week, but overall his numbers are kind of down. Herbert's numbers a little bit down. There's just, those are guys that. Mahomes he brought up. I mean, Josh Allen threw for a lot of yards, but kind of struggled against Miami. Tua came back to earth against Buffalo. So it's tough to stay consistent in this league. I think the defenses have somewhat caught up because for fantasy, there's still a lot of high scoring QBs, but they're just not quite as consistent as like that year with Mahomes, where it was just like every single week he was going off. Or now there's just not really much of that with the defenses coming to adjusting.
Yeah, and I think they'll, quarterbacks will figure it out as well. And we'll see better play, obviously, offensively moving forward.
Yeah.
But that does lead me to, I think, the most important thing I wanted to talk about. I don't think it's too early at this point. Let's kind of update the MVP race at this point through 3 weeks. And I think if, like, for some reason the season ended today, it would be hard not to say that Lamar Jackson deserves to win MVP. I don't think there is really anybody, but very few players are playing better than Lamar right now. He is that entire team. That defense is still figuring out, in a new scheme and dealing with injuries and getting healthy at the right time. But on offense, he is their running game. He is their passing game, and he leads the league in passing touchdowns. He leads the league in total touchdowns, leads the league in passer rating. He's like 3rd in yards per attempt. He's up there in big time throws per pro at PFF. He is just across the board really good through 3 weeks. Really early, obviously, but this is kind of what we saw last year when the Ravens were 8-3 with a banged up team, number 1 seed in the AFC, and it was basically all because of Lamar. And then he gets injured. They missed the playoffs. And I think it just shows maybe his importance to that team. And it's just hard. I feel like the conversation around Lamar, in the offseason and after, obviously playoff disappointments or whatever, was always wrong, right? We knew that, hey, there's nobody that can run the ball like him. And it's if he takes that progression as a passer, I mean, we're talking about a guy who is one of the best in the league. And I felt like the conversation was always wrong because he had this floor, this baseline that no one was really talking about. And now we're seeing the ceiling from him. And honestly, it's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's been pretty consistent. I mean, with a lot of the quarterbacks, like we said, we're kind of struggling. Him and Josh Allen, I'd say, are neck and neck for the MVP right now. Because even though the Bills lost yesterday, Allen's still having a hell of a year. So those two are just, so fun to watch, so explosive. And there's a correlation here. Them Jalen Hurts, they all have that dual threat ability. That's the one thing. I feel like most defenses have figured out pocket passers nowadays, but those dual threat quarterbacks is, for example, the Saints defense. Saints have an above average defense, but when it comes to mobile quarterbacks, they don't have answers for him. Marcus Mariota in week 1, not even a very good mobile quarterback, ran all over the Saints. And last year, Jalen Hurts absolutely dominated the Saints. So it's just one of those things. A lot of defenses still are adjusting to that. And as a result, guys like Lamar Jackson are thriving.
MVP odds at Caesar Sportsbook have been updated. Josh Allen is still the favorite, and I think you're right. He deserves to be the favorite. Plus 300. Patrick Mahomes plus 550. Jalen Hurts 7-1. Lamar Jackson 7-1. And then you get into Tua at 14-1. Remember, MVP. The MVP is going to go to the quarterback on the team who finishes with number 1 seed in their conference. Like, we can talk about all these other quarterbacks who put up numbers, but you have to be on a good team to be considered. And it's way too early to know who exactly those good teams are. But yeah, if that gives you any indication, think about that before placing those bets. Going around the rest of the slate, is there anything else that jumped out to you? Maybe a team that you downgraded after seeing a performance over the weekend, or maybe a team that you upgraded after seeing their performance?
Yeah, I hate to pile on with the Saints, but I mean, of course, being from New Orleans, I mean, I keep up with them close. And I mean, I just gotta be honest. After watching the game, you gotta downgrade him, because to me, Jameis Winston's clearly not healthy. It was not fun to watch. He connected on some deep balls at the end, made his stats look decent. But it was garbage time. I mean, because the game was. I mean, I guess they still had a chance. Carolina wasn't doing much either, but you just knew deep down that they weren't going to win, because even the defense was getting tired at the end because they were on the field so much. So like. It was getting bad. Jameis once again threw 2 picks. It's like, I don't know, man. I know Andy Dalton's not great, but I'm thinking a switch might not be the worst idea, because and it's not a knock on Jameis. I feel when Jameis is healthy, he's an average to above average quarterback. But to me, he's clearly not healthy, and as a result, he's well below average. Speaking of quarterback play being down, he has been near the bottom of that with 5 picks. I mean, that's inexcusable. So he's either got to sit out and get healthy or just, or perform. If you can play through the pain, then cool. But if you can't, then sit out and let the backup take over. That's just how I feel about it. But I don't know, man. Definitely got to shake back, or else the Saints could be in for a long season.
Yeah, and that's a tough one too, because the Saints were also kind of a trendy team in a weak NFC to like maybe get in the wild card conversation. Still early, obviously, but that was a tough
not
one.
over. Not looking good.
I think first off, I'm downgrading the Commanders, and I'm done betting the Commanders. Hand up. I apologize to anybody who's followed me the last couple weeks after being on the Commanders. That offense can be pretty brutal because of Carson Wentz, and I should have been more aware of that and accepted that reality, because I'm tired of betting on the Commanders. So hand up, we'll do that. We'll downgrade them in my power ratings, and we'll try to not bet them moving forward, at least in the near future. I think I do want to get into the Dolphins-Bills game a little bit. That was such a weird game. I need to rewatch it, but just the fact that the Bills ran so many more plays than the Dolphins, and then obviously the Dolphins were able to prevail. Like, they're such a really fun story, and they're doing a lot of great things, and it's nice that you're doing this, because their schedule down the stretch is not favorable. So it's nice to rack up these wins now. But I do think that, we have to admit that the Bills were kind of banged up a little bit as well. But I'm really interested about that game. What did you think about the Dolphins-Bills?
Yeah, that was just one of those gritty kind of games, and I think the Dolphins had a major home field advantage, because it was hot down there in South Florida. I mean, hot. Like, it was the Josh Allen was about to pass out. And him and Tua shook hands after he was like leaning on Tua. Like, it was like, man, dude, like Tua's probably like, man, you're that done, like you're that passed out. But Tua's probably more used to that, being that, I mean, he's played in Alabama, and I mean, he's used to that hot weather. Where Allen, he's not. I don't think he's as used to that. But the problem is for Miami, that's not going to last. I mean, even in Miami, the weather gets cooler as we get later into the season, and once the weather gets cooler, that's going to, obviously help out the Bills, being that they're used to that. And the Dolphins, I'm not buying them. I think the Dolphins are the biggest scam right now as far as their value. There's no value to be had. I think they'll probably make the playoffs. I mean, they started 3-0. Their defense is legit. They've got weapons. So I'm not saying they're a total fraud, but as far as them being a Super Bowl contender or Tua being an MVP candidate, I'm not buying it one bit.
Yeah, and the market might agree with you at least for this week because Dolphins are already 3.5-point underdogs against the Bengals on Thursday Night Football, which again probably alludes to what you're talking about. The short week, they have to travel, and they just played. Their defense played a bunch of plays in that heat. So yeah, I think maybe it'll be interesting to see how it works this week for them, and maybe if they continue that, you really have to take them seriously. But AFC is so hard, right? That these wins you can't discredit them. Like they're credit to what they're doing and their start that they've had. But they were close to losing that game. They're close to losing the Ravens game as well. But they are a fun story through the early part of the season.
No doubt.
Real quick before we get out of here, Monday Night Football. Any action on tonight's game for Giants and Cowboys?
Yeah, actually, those were my plays today for the best bets. I really like the under in this one. Both offenses are a train wreck. I mean, you got Cooper Rush and Daniel Jones. Neither of them have good chemistry with their weapons. The Giants running game, they have the edge there, but Saquon, I mean, we all know how Saquon is. He's fun to watch, but unless he rips off some big run, I mean, he's just not very consistent between the tackles, and then Zeke isn't what he once was. So there's just O-line issues on both sides where I'm not really seeing many points scored here. And both defenses have been really good through 2 weeks. They've allowed less than 20 points each. So to me, I'm smashing the under here. And I also kind of like the Dallas money line because they've owned the Giants over the years. And I don't really see this Giants team. Like I said earlier, I think they're fool's gold. I don't see them, even with Brian Dable being much better than they have been recently. It's still Daniel Jones, y'all. It's still a below average QB. So give me the value at the Cowboys money line.
Well, if your Sunday was any indication, people should follow your picks because you have been hot, and that's good news for me because I have similar bets that I wrote up for at shawlocal.com/bet. I took the under on Daniel Jones completions at 18.5 and attempts at 27.5 or 28.5. I can't remember what the number exactly was there. And then I closed it out with the Cowboys money line as well. Giants are down a lot in that receiver room. It might be the worst unit in all of football now with all the injuries they're dealing with. And the Cowboys, I know they have Cooper Rush, but they have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. I just feel like this is a toss-up game, and I might lean to the team with more talented players.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. There's a lot more talent. I mean, Micah Parsons, they got elite defensive players, or the Giants. It's very young. They're getting Kayvon Thibodeau back, so that should help. But he's just a rookie. I mean, he's like he might get a sack or two, but he's not at the level of Micah Parsons.
He is Spencer Urquhart. You can follow him at Bet with Spence. Check all his content out at betnola.com. Really great stuff. He did a great job betting this past weekend and recapping this past weekend. So I really appreciate him being on this edition of the Bet Chicago Sports Podcast. I'll be back on Wednesday with an earlier edition of the next episode to get into maybe how to do some projections and ratings and stuff like that with a really special guest for that one as well. So looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Spencer, for joining me on this episode. For Spencer, I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you for listening to the Bet Chicago Sports Podcast, and see you next time.